emails will come off the podium.
State your name.
You can sit.
I guess I can. Raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear?
That way Sam will know who you are.
Hey, Josh.
Hey, it's a little sketchy.
That's what I figured, that's what I did.
You didn't know about it?
We haven't missed nothing yet, so.
Yeah, we just started.
Really?
Is it on now?
We want to make sure you're here.
Are we back on, Stephanie, are we on? Yeah. Okay, I'll turn it over to Joe and he can talk about future projects.
All right, we'll get started. Not planning to take too much of your time. We'll give you a quick rundown of kind of where we're at with our current projects and looking into the future. You want to go to the next slide, please, Stephanie?
Yeah, I was just making sure we were on.
So these projects are either currently funded, well, they're all funded, I guess. Bad news, I have some bad news I don't really want to mention, but Raleigh and Norway Bike Path is on hold till next year because of where we're at with budget numbers. They're suggesting that we bid early or late summer and start construction right away next year. They've had quite a few projects come in over budget, so they're hoping that this will give them better bid numbers. East Spruce Street, that runs past the railroad tracks and by MTI, is also on hold. Railroads switched foremans for the area, however you want to call it. So it's almost like the old guy didn't exist. So we've had some very frustrating hurdles with that project as well. So hopefully we will get those done next year.
Well, those were two projects I was really excited about.
To be honest, those were two projects that were here when I started in 2019.
I know.
So,
And here they sit.
yep. When you're at the bay of someone else's money, it's pretty tough. So, you want to, yep. So now these are the projects that we're looking at currently now and moving into the future. Life Say Utility Improvements, North Wastewater Treatment Facility, and the ground storage tank. Both have either a partial or the surcharge in rate or in place. The wastewater treatment facility and the ground storage tank are going to have to be supplemented with additional. And then the 23rd and Ullman lift station, I guess the next 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 projects are what we applied for in the last DANR funding round. And I'll talk kind of about the grants that we got for that in the next slides. 1st and 5th Avenues from Berta Foster, there's a surcharge needed for those projects, and we also need to still do the SRS application and approval. Kind of some of these conversations will dictate how we move forward with those two projects. With wastewater treatment facility and the ground storage tank, we will probably have exhausted our grant ability out of the ARPA. It's kind of small on this screen. This gives us total project costs, the projected grant award, along with what's required for the loan amount. So with our DANR applications last time, they lumped all of our grant money into the South Wastewater Treatment Facility. We have that estimated at $30 million. We received roughly $17 million in grant. Of that, 2.8 million was matched because we used by the state, because we used our local ARPA funds that were directed to us from the feds. We actually received 1.5 million in grant that we were not expecting. That actually is from DANR separate from the ARPA money. So that was exciting.
How did we get that grant?
So basically, it's due to where our rates are at. Our rates are starting to get high enough where DANR will take some of that burden off the taxpayers and give us grant money to supplement. So I guess this is similar to the table that you saw in December when we went through these same projects. breaks the surcharges or our rates increases down into a base surcharge amount and a rate surcharge amount, and where we'd be looking at with total cost for a 5,000 gallon user for water and sewer, and that's down on the bottom right, $111.85 for strictly base rate increase, and then $106.97 for strictly a rate surcharge increase. Stephanie, you want to go to the next slide, please?
So just remind
Yep.
me that surcharge is just flat, everybody pays the same.
Base
rate
surcharge, yep.
based on usage.
Correct.
The surcharge is just where we set aside money for the repayment of the debt, and that can either be the base, which is that first column, and then the rate is the per unit cost.
Yep. So this is our rate structure. That is kind of how we're looking at potentially moving into the future. The table to the right shows what the current larger cities in the state are based off today's rates. So you can see we're currently sitting at 7. Over the next 3 years, that would put us at second for the rates are now. But I think it's very important to say that the other communities that are applying for these same funds, that it's not reflected in this table. So I mean, I would, if everybody's, percentage based on the projects, that everyone would be elevated about the same percentage if all the communities are going after the grant money. So the projects that we are looking at in total dollars exhaust the total grant that we are eligible for. So if we start backing down projects, we lose that 30% grant, or a portion of that 30% grant for these projects. And again, this is for a 6,000 gallon user for this table. So I guess in the very near future, we would be proposing, see here, at $2.81 on the base rate for sewer, along with a 29-cent increase for the water usage rate for a sewer user. Then also $7.84 base rate increase for water. That is for the ground storage tank project, the wastewater treatment, the North Wastewater Treatment Plant Facility, and I believe that's it. It's a lot of numbers. And I guess with that, I'll open it up to any questions.
I guess I always, is there any other way, that I always want to ask, because I know that, this is a pretty significant increase, so people will want to know, is there any other way that we can fund these, or are there any of these things that we can do without? And I think I know the answer to that, but I want you to, if I'm...
Certainly.
Joe,
Yep.
what do you say?
Yep, I understand. So the answer to that question is this work needs to be done. We are tackling some bigger projects that have been pushed back for quite a while. We studied those areas and we determined that the improvements needed to be made. It just so happened that I wouldn't say COVID fell in our lap, but opened up a lot of grant dollars eligible to make some of these bigger projects, easier to take in. I know it's never easy to increase rates, and that's tough.
I think the other comment is if you don't do the work now, it's going to be more expensive in the future.
Yep.
By doing the work now, you have $36 million worth of grants now. Okay, for 26 plus another 2.8 that they matched of our 2.8,
Yep.
and then the 1.5 or whatever it was on top of that. So you're still going to have to do these projects in the future, but the difference is you're 100% funding them at a higher cost than starting the process now.
Yeah, right now, the total projects that we have that were shown on that last slide were roughly 81 million, and we're showing a roughly $20 million worth of grant.
So like on that, for Watertown and Aberdeen are bottom and Yankton's not even on there. Does that mean they're in between projects?
So Yankton just did a very large wastewater treatment plant facility. I believe they had a $8 million project. Pier just did a brand-new wastewater treatment facility, water treatment facility. So, I mean, there's large projects that these communities are doing that aren't reflected in the rate studies that we get from AE2S yet.
Yeah, and I can tell you that with the South Dakota City Managers Association, 90% of, I think 100% of the first-class municipalities were using their SRF loan, the last ARPA money, as an SRF project to get the matching funds from the state. Everybody was taking that same approach that we looked at to double your money, your grant money.
So, and it should be noted, we had our DA&R funding round last week. Typically, it lasts a couple hours. It was stretched over 2 days on this one, just because of all the ARPA money and all the applications and communities hoping to capitalize on this, to me, once-in-a-lifetime event.
So those numbers, the rankings, I mean, that's not a permanent, that's kind of an artificial.
Right.
Right, that's telling you that if you took a snapshot right now, our highest rate after all the increases, we still wouldn't be the highest in the state with nobody else seeing any increases. And I think those numbers were actually they report them the previous year, so that's not 2022
No.
rates.
So Michelle was saying she just reported ours for last year, or where we're at now, and then I believe those reports come out in November or December. So they had just come out, I think, when we had given the rate update at our December meeting.
Right, so that AE2S report is lagging over a year behind. We did do a more recent update with the current rates that I called around on, and we were still middle of the road,
Yep.
I think, on those when we looked at them, so.
Pierce getting ready to put a $300 million water treatment facility online, which I'm sure will increase their rates dramatically.
Joe, I was going to ask on, especially like sewer, on the percentage increase for the years 11, 19, and then 4 and 7. What was the thought process behind having those larger up front and then, or instead of a same percentage, like 6% all the way through?
So the reason being is we want to get those large projects started now, because if we don't have these projects done by 2025, there's a chance that we could lose our ARPA money. So we want to make sure these larger, bigger projects are completed by 2025.
And you do have to take the full increase when you do the application, because you have to show your surcharges in place in order to close on the financing.
Right.
So you couldn't spread that out later anyways.
You can't say trust us.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, these projects are big enough that we can't float, that we need to close the loans prior to starting work.
And we are looking at the 4 years here. That's what we're wanting approval for tonight, just not next year. Like, you got 22 through 25. You want all those rates looked at and approved tonight so then we could move forward. It's just not the 2022 that we're looking at.
So the DA&R funding that was approved at the last meeting, which included, those 7 projects I had mentioned, in order to keep our grant amount where it's at, we need to do all of that work. Because those projects would have had the grant spread over 30% of all of them. They just took it all and put it in the South Wastewater Treatment Plant project. So I guess to answer that question, it would be yes.
You have to complete all the projects on that list, but you don't necessarily have to do all the rate increases as of today.
Correct.
Those rate increases, we could still bring a proposal to council that showed those increases graduated over a period of time, that they're laid out, and then we just implement the surcharge when we're getting close to the loan.
Correct. Because, these are for prices, today with contingency. So we're going to move on these as quick as possible so we can lock in our, the project costs. But there's always the potential that these numbers could go up or they could go down. Probably not down. So.
Well, yeah, just like these two did not go down.
Right. And the good thing is our big projects, with the exception of the south wastewater treatment plant, we have them for the most part locked in. Like the north, we know what our dollar is now. We have a pretty good idea on the garage storage tank, and that's probably going to bid in June or July. So then we'll have that locked down. You know, when the north wastewater treatment plant was 10 million, now we're at 18. You know, the south was at 20 and we upped it to 30. So I mean, we're hoping we have contingency in there to cover where we're at, but we're hoping to get started on that one sooner than later.
And we did not put anything on the agenda tonight for action, anticipating that we would bring it back to council at a future council meeting for you to take action on.
And just to clarify, when you go back to that original list, it said which ones needed the subsidy or the surcharge. The surcharge is what you're including that surcharge to cover all of
Yep.
those projects.
Yep.
It's not like like as we go, there will be other surcharges. It's
Correct.
like everything's in there.
This is our project list through 25.
Can I ask you? And looking at the numbers, we have one sheet with 6,000 gallon usage and another with 5,000 gallon. Can we pick one?
I would like to. The issue we have is SRF, the DANR looks at 5,000. Everything is 5,000 gallons. Our rate study that we use to compare to the other cities, all that's in 6.
But Steve, I have converted that to 5,000 for you guys in the past. I can do that again.
It's just,
The only reason I like to be wary of
because somebody's going to look at 111.85 versus the other number and go, well, those aren't the same number.
the only reason I'm a little wary of converting the 6 is because we don't know what their base rates are and what their unit rates are, because it's a combined total. We could probably come close, but
Okay.
that's why we look at both.
So the average homeowner uses 5,000 gallons of water?
Typically, yep.
Isn't that a two-person?
Two-person would be less.
Okay.
So I mean,
Put that in writing for me.
you're at 6. Like your typical, you know, retiree family probably uses 2.
Unless they have a swimming pool, then it's a little more.
And if you sprinkle, it's a little more.
Yeah, you want to make sure your toilets don't run.
And don't be out of town when that happens. 3 days.
Well, you'll be a good customer, Mitchell.
I will be a very good customer. My water rates are going down.
Joe, thanks you.
Very good.
Turn it over to Justin.
Okay, we'll turn it over to Justin now.
Scroll through the PDF probably. All right, well, I'm going to try to keep this very brief. This is not intended to be a comprehensive presentation. Just want to try to cover a couple quick points, give a few tips here and there. So first thing I wanted to point out is that council and boards have the ability to set their own rules on how to conduct their meetings. In a lot of cases, people or the boards will just default to using Robert's Rules of Order, but that's not a requirement. There's nothing in the statute or anything that would require you to adopt that or strictly follow it. So there's a lot of latitude on how you want to follow those rules and what rules you'd even need to follow. The main purpose for having the rules in place is to help you conduct the meetings in an orderly manner. It's intended to allow everybody a fair opportunity to participate, even somebody that might be in the minority on a specific issue, give them a fair opportunity to discuss the issue. And then it's also, the rules are also intended to help keep the record clean and keep better track of the discussion as it takes place and keep better track of what actions are actually being discussed and taken. So one of the first steps that a board or a committee will take is establishing the presiding officer. A lot of our boards have been in place for a long time. Definitely no stranger here with the city council to that. With the council specifically, the mayor conducts the meeting. For other boards, it might be a sitting member on that committee. It might be a member of the staff. Again, there's no strict requirement that it be any particular person. That person, the presiding officer, is going to be responsible for conducting the meeting, keeping order, making sure that the business is taken care of in an orderly manner. The presiding officer should be responsible for handing the floor over to people, the individual speakers. Really, people aren't supposed to be speaking until they're recognized by the chairperson, and then they're able to speak once they're recognized. The presiding officer will also be responsible for handling the motions, amendments, votes, etc., so they'll be in charge of calling all that. So first thing, as you start working your way through agenda items, the presiding officer will call a particular item. They'll usually hand the floor over to a staff member or to public to provide some initial input on the subject, and then the body will typically not be involved in much of the discussion at that point unless there's some kind of short clarification or question that they might have. So once all that initial round of input has taken place, usually at that point the discussion will get limited to the board itself, and usually at that point somebody will either, well, they'll have discussion on what's going on or the item that's on the agenda, or they'll make a motion and then there will be discussion on that motion. So that brings us to our little quick section here on motions. Any action that the council or the board takes, it has to take as a unit. So the only way that the board can officially act on something is by making a motion to do some particular action and then to have a vote in favor and approving whatever that action might be. So that motion is probably going to depend on what the item is, and depending on what the item is and what the result is going to be, that might affect how many votes you need in favor of that motion. It might impact how you need to phrase that motion, but we'll get to more on that in a second here. Another thing to keep in mind is that motions all have a hierarchy, and really the main motion, which in a lot of our cases is going to be a motion to approve, that's one of the lower items on that hierarchy. So you'll see the list later, there's a lot of things that need to be addressed or can need to be addressed before you'd get to that main motion and taking a final action on that. But again, we don't strictly follow the rules. We don't have to strictly follow the rules, so a lot of this is just best practices. So for your main motions, like I said, that's probably in most cases going to be a motion to approve, could be a motion to set the date, might be an action to appoint a member to a board or something along those lines. Often it's going to be very basic, very simple. You might just have to change a few words around here and there. So depending on the item, it may be necessary to state your reasoning before making the motion, and that comes into play most often for variances. In our case, our code requires that you make findings on that particular matter. So there's certain things under our code that you're required to find under those. But the easy way to address that is if you plan to vote in favor of a variance, just stating the reasons that you are going to be in favor of approving that variance will act as you're making those findings. So you kind of kill two birds with one stone. As long as you're laying out there why you're taking the action that you're suggesting that the board take, if the board ultimately votes in favor of that, then you've already laid out your findings. So just an easy way to address that part of it. Another thing to keep in mind, which we kind of ran into a couple weeks ago and served as the reason Bob had me put this little presentation together, is you'll want to make your motions and frame them in the positive, even if you end up planning to vote against it. So you'll almost always be making a motion to approve and not a motion to deny, or not a motion to not approve things. So there are some rare exceptions. For example, if you're dealing with a situation, a bid award, and you want to reject all the bids, then you're going to want to make a motion to reject all the bids. It's not going to be a motion to award to the low bidder and then vote against it, because, you know, it sounds like you're framing it in the negative, but really you're still taking the positive action to reject all of them. So it's a little confusing. If you ever get, or if you ever feel like you need some input on how to phrase a particular motion, I think just ask, and we can try to walk through that on the fly. So some other motions that you might see that are fairly common is a motion to amend. So if you've got a main motion pending and, you know, after discussion, there's something that you might want to add to that main motion, you'll make a motion to amend, you'll act on that motion to amend, and then depending on how that vote goes, that'll change the main motion. So you might have a motion pending to approve a daycare, and, you know, we have standing conditions that we approve for all those, but say you didn't have those and you wanted, while that motion was pending, you wanted to add a condition that they pass a fire inspection. You'd make a motion that the applicant pass a fire inspection, you'd vote on that motion. As long as that gets approved, then that amends the original motion, and then you act on that original motion. So
Does the same person who makes the original motion have to amend the motion?
no. So anybody can offer an amendment. And I guess that's true under Robert's rules, and obviously I said we don't have to strictly follow those, but yeah, that's absolutely the case. Another thing.
So if the person who made the original motion doesn't agree with the amendment, then they would vote against their own motion?
You'd vote against the motion to amend.
Right, but if the
You would
amendment.
vote against the amendment.
Right,
Yep.
so then let's say the amendment passes, but I didn't like it.
Yeah,
Then
so,
would I vote against my own motion?
so yeah, if you make,
Just clarifying.
and we can discuss
I wanna
that in a
make sure
little
I do
bit.
it right.
I know we're running up against the 6 o'clock here, so maybe we'll need to come back to this, but.
I mean, it's not a big deal, I just was curious.
But yeah, you'd process the motion to amend, and then if you view that as hostile, then you could very well end up voting against the original motion. So probably one more thing here before we hit the 6 o'clock start. Motion to table is another one that we come up with a lot. Technically, under Robert's rules, that is going to kill the pending motion, and how we actually do that, it's considered a motion to postpone under the rules. Again, we don't have to follow the rules technically, so you can call it a motion to postpone, or you can call it a motion to table, as long as you're clear as to what action you're taking. So I think with it being 6 o'clock, we may want to adjourn this part. We can come back and hit the last couple of slides here at some point in the meeting.
Justin, will you be going back to the planning and zoning and
Yes.
tell them how to make the motions too now?
Yep. Well, the plan is to give these to several of the other committees, so.
All right. We'll call the regular council meeting order, start with pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Invocation by Word of Life Church. Okay, now here, roll call, please.
Sabers.
Here.
Rice.
Here.
Dosher. McCardle. Barrington.
Here.
Allen.
Here.
Charts.
Here.
Smith.
Here. Okay, we have a quorum. One thing I want to add to the agenda is just before we adjourn, we need to go into a brief executive session for legal items. So we'll add that to the agenda. With that, approval of consent agenda items.
Mayor, one other thing you'll want to do is, if you're going to revisit that presentation, you'll want to slot
Right
that in
before that.
somewhere.
Okay. So we'll add that right before the executive session to finish up the presentation on Robert's Rule of Order. Approval of consent agenda items. Items appearing on the consent agenda may be removed by City Council member for discussion at the beginning of formal agenda items. Is there anything you wish to remove or discuss?
Yeah, one question, and no problem with the pickleball courts, but do we have a location idea or multiple location ideas? Or
Yeah, Kevin said right out here in the plaza.
Oh.
No, it's, Kevin, you want to speak to that? I think it's Hitchcock Park.
Hitchcock Park is correct. It would be just north of the tennis courts.
We don't have the grant yet. Though.
right. Okay, good, thank you.
Yep. Further discussion?
Motion to approve consent agenda.
Motion by Mr. McCardle.
Second.
Second by Mr. Rice. Further discussion? Anybody in the audience wish to address any of these items? Roll call, please.
Dosher. McCardle.
Aye.
Barrington.
Aye.
Allen.
Aye.
Sharps.
Aye.
Smith.
Aye.
Savers.
Aye.
Rice.
Aye.
Motion carries. Citizens input. If you need to address a mayor or member of the City Council on an item that is not on the agenda, excluding personnel items, please come forward to the podium, state your name and your concern. Presentations are limited to 3 minutes. Items will be considered, but no action will be taken. Does anybody wish to address council? Okay. Anything council wants to say? Nope. Okay. Board of Adjustment, entertain a motion for council to recess to this Board of Adjustment.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Allen.
Second.
Second by Mr. Rice. Discussion. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carried. Hearing and action on application for Holtz. Amy Holtz has applied for a conditional use permit to operate a family residential daycare located at 708 East 2nd Avenue, legally described as Lot 9, Block 16, FM Green Addition, City of Mitchell, Davis County, South Dakota. Property is zoned R2. Mr. Jennings.
Mayor and Council, Planning Commission recommended approval of this 6-0 with one absent with the three normal conditions. The fire inspection was not done before Planning Commission, and it was actually done this morning, so that has been done in past. There were 3 responses in favor. No one was opposed. One of the responses in favor was that there's congestion in the alley, and they just wish that all the pickups and drop-offs would be on the street, which would be pretty typical for that. There were no major concerns from the board at all.
Move to approve with conditions.
Motion by Mr. Rice. Second by Mr. Allen. Further discussion? Anybody in the audience wish to address this? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carried. Hearing an action on application for Lang. Jasmine Lang has applied for conditional use permit to operate a family residential daycare located at 717 West Ash Avenue, legally described as Lot 12, Block 10 of Railroad Addition, City of Mitchell, Davis County, South Dakota. Property zoned R2. Mr. Jennings.
Mayor and Council, Planning Commission recommended approval of 5-0 with one absent and one abstention, with the same 3 conditions set forth. Fire inspection has not been completed. It's scheduled for Thursday. She had some electrical issues due to all the wind, took down a power line and tree damage, and so she was getting that cleaned up. We did not get any responses for or against this one at all.
Okay.
Move to approve with pending the fire inspection and the conditions.
Motion by Mrs. Chart. Still you okay with that? Motion second by Mr. McCardle. Further discussion? Anybody in the audience wish to address this one? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried. Hearing an action on application for Hauser. Mike Hauser has applied for a variance for a combination of attached and detached accessory buildings of 3,270 square feet versus 2,000 square feet, and a height variance of 24 feet versus 22 feet for a new accessory building located at 2021 West 23rd Avenue, legally described as Lot A of Mason's Addition, in the northeast quarter of Section 17, Township 103 North, Range 60 west of the 5th Prime Meridian, Davis County, South Dakota. Property zoned R4, high density. Mr. Jennings.
Mayor and Council, Planning Commission recommended approval of this 6-0 with one absent. This is outside the City of Mitchell. It's just west of Elevator Road. There were no responses from those notified. Per the zoning ordinance, it states attached and detached garages is a combination from 2000. There is no attached garage, but that's the way it's stated in the ordinance. If you see on the GIS there, they're going to be removing the building to the southeast and replacing that with a 42 by 60 shed. And the one to the southwest there stays, and that's 10 by 75, or excuse me, 15 by 50 foot. So the combination of those two gets the total of the 3270. Yep. There were no responses from anybody. Planning Commission didn't have any issues with it at all.
Move to approve.
Motion by Mrs. Charles,
Second.
second by Mr. Rice. Further discussion?
So the county has to do this, or?
County does not have to do
Because
anything.
it's within the 1 mile?
Correct.
Anybody in the audience wish to address this? Okay, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carried. Hearing and action on application for Mitchell Prehistoric Indian Village. Mitchell Prehistoric Indian Village has applied for a variance for a minimum front yard setback for a historic site building of 22 feet versus 30 feet located at 3200 Indian Village Road, legally described as the Mitchell Prehistoric Indian Village site in the northeast quarter of Section 9, Township 103 North, Range 60 West of the 5th Prime Meridian, Davis County, South Dakota. Property is zoned PL Public Lands. Mr. Janigas.
Mayor and Council, Planning Commission recommended approval of this 6-0 with one absent, with the condition that it's no closer than the existing building. They plan to tear down the existing building, put up a new shed for that. It'll be cold storage, storage of artifacts, and then also a place for them to put dirt and screed dirt through it. Discussion during it, there's a historic ditch you can see on the bottom picture, that darker green line that goes just north of the building there. They can't excavate anything out of there, so what they do is they build on top of it, put some plastic down, fill, and then concrete on top of that, and that meets the regulations for National Historic Places. Applicants are here if you have any questions for them at all.
Motion approved.
Motion by Mr. Savers.
Second.
Second by Mrs. Chark. Further discussion? Anybody in the audience wish to address this? Those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carried. Action to set the date for Board of Adjustment hearing 5/2/22. Stephen Laughlin has applied for a variance for an accessory building to be located in the front yard, located at 925 East 7th, legally 9 West 7th, or East 7th Avenue, legally described as Lot 4, Block 6, FM Green Edition, City of Mitchell, Davis County, South Dakota, real property zoned R2. Janice?
We're just setting the date for this one for next meeting. Planning Commission will hear it next week.
Motion by Mr. Rice, second by Mr. Barrington. Okay. Further discussion? Anybody in the audience wish to address this? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carried. Reconvene as City Council. Entertain a motion for Board of Adjustment to adjourn City Council reconvene a regular session.
So moved.
Motion by Mrs. Charks.
Second.
Second by Mr. Allen. Further discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carried. Hearing and action on application to Corn Palace Shrine Club for a special event liquor license located at the Masonic Temple for April 30th, 2022 for a wedding dance. Mr. Coster, any issues?
Mayor and Council, Police Department has no concerns of this.
Move to approve. Second.
Motion by Mr. McCardle, second by Mr. Rice. Further discussion? Anybody in the audience wish to address this? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carried. Action to award bid for 200 through 400 blocks of East 10th Avenue Utility Upgrade Project 2022-2. Mr. Schrader.
Mr. Mayor, Council, bids were open on March 15th in City Hall Council Chambers at 1:30. 5 bids were received. Low bid for bid schedules A and C was Schoenfelder Construction. Low bid for bid schedule B was First Rate Excavate. Bid schedules A and C are for the underground utilities, and bid schedule B is for the concrete work on the project. Project is under budget, and staff recommends awarding bid schedules A and C to Schoenfelder Construction for a total bid amount of $417,232.80, and bid schedule B to First Rate Excavate, Inc. for a total bid amount of $162,618.02.
much did we budget for that, Joe?
We budgeted
It must have been a whole lot.
roughly around 900,000.
Don't worry, we'll spend the rest of it.
The numbers were under what we received for the 9th and 5th project. And I think this project is just a bread and butter project. It's 3 blocks, regular utility replacement. It's an easy project.
Move to approve.
Motion by Mr. McCardle,
Second.
second by Mr. Allen.
And so this would be this construction season?
Correct. I believe the completion date is October for the underground and first part of November for concrete work.
Fight the weather.
Yeah, concrete's a lot easier than a lot of other.
Yeah, that's it.
Further discussion? Anybody in the audience wish to address this? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried. Special event application for the Beers and Gears Mountain Bike Race event, July 16th, 2022. Mr. Schrader, you taking this, or is Mr. Nelson?
I can take it. The permit was requested by Ron's Bike Shop and Palace City Peddlers. Like the mayor said, the event will be on July 16th from 6:30 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. They are requesting a Camp Arroyo rental. Staff recommends approval of the special event, and I do believe the applicant is here if you have any questions.
This is your chance to come up and promote it. Free of charge.
Yeah, free, I like it. So basically, we're just going to do a,
Take the statement.
Cody Denny from Ron's Bike Shop. So basically, we're just going to do a loop system around the north trail. So we'll use Camp Aurora, Sandy Beach, Fire Steel, and the West Launch Trail. So it's all going to be on the north side of trails. And we're asking to close Sandy Beach parking lot just for the safety of the bike riders so they can unload their bikes and have a safe spot because of all the construction that's going up there right now. And that's about it. We're looking probably about 150 riders. Hopefully, we'll see how it turns out. So, first of its kind on this side for us. We have good trails to use. So,
Questions for Mr. Denny?
The timing, so July 16th, is that,
that's the Friday.
is that our rodeo weekend?
Should be.
I think it is.
Also, I'm just,
Yeah.
that's fine. I'm
Well,
just
we have it in the
saying-
morning, so
Great.
it'd probably take 3 or 4 hours.
And are you going to have races or just,
We're gonna have a race.
demo-
No,
you're gonna-
we're gonna actually do a race. It's gonna be a lap system, so 1, 2,
Okay.
and 4 laps. And that's it. So you're looking 8, 16, or 32 miles.
okay,
So, yeah. Trying something new,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Bring people to town and enjoy our trails.
yeah.
No. I got an electric bike for you, but you can't ride it.
You can't,
You gotta-
not qualified for this
No,
race, huh?
Not yet.
ATV or not?
No, no.
You got to take steroids instead.
Yeah.
So I get the gears, where do the beers come in?
So we're gonna have pre-registration Friday night at Blarney's. So we're gonna do like pint glasses, and then Blarney's gonna fill the first pint glass up for free or whatever, so, yeah. And that's usually what goes with bikes, you ride a bike and you drink beer afterwards.
Great,
So, that's usually how we start, yeah, so,
okay.
Good luck.
all right, thanks.
I think that's really a great thing for Mitchell, start new things, and anyway, I'll make a motion to approve.
Okay, motion by Mr. Sabers,
Second.
second by Mr. Rice. Further discussion? Anybody in the audience want to address this, other than Mr. Denny? Okay, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carried. Action to approve South Dakota DOT Section 5339 Grant Funds Amendment for Vehicle Cameras. Mrs. Pickett.
Mayor, Council, Jessica Pickett, Community Services Department. This is an amendment to our original agreement. Of course, as everybody knows, prices go up, and the prices from our original quote when we applied for this grant application went up. So since there was additional cost, we asked the state if there was any additional funding, and I figured it doesn't hurt to ask, and they said yes, so they decided to give us an amendment to cover those additional costs at the 80/20.
Ask and ye shall receive. I move to approve.
Motion by Mrs. Chark. Second by Mr. Smith. Further discussion? Anybody in the audience wish to address this? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carried. Action to approve agreement A2022-15, design of Quint Street from Miller Street to Wisconsin Street, project 2022-7 with SPN. Mr. Schrader.
Mr. Mayor, Council, so this is an agreement with SPN Associates to complete a design of what would be Quincy Street, directly north of property owned by Jeremy Jensen. This will be an assessment project. The city will be responsible for the north half. Jeremy Jensen would be responsible for the south half. So we are requesting that SPN be approved to move forward with the design in the amount not to exceed $17,000.
Will this help with any of the draining issues that we've had out that direction?
So we've had preliminary conversations with Jeremy Jensen and SPN, who is their engineer for this site. They'll have to follow all the standards that everyone else will, so they'll be required to have a drainage plan per our ordinance. So whether it will alleviate it, I can't say for sure, but I would imagine it will definitely be better.
A lot of the problems are south on Wisconsin near Spruce, so that you really can't see.
So
Unfortunately, it's not in that area.
So we're paving that road. That road will
Yep.
be paved, correct?
Correct.
So Wisconsin currently is not paved, is that correct?
Correct. And this will butt up against Miller.
And it won't have anything to do with Wisconsin?
No. We'll have SPN design all the way to Wisconsin, but the only portion of the road being completed is just across Jeremy Jensen's property. And right now, Miller is just a rural section street, so we'll work with SPN to decide whether it makes sense to have curb and gutter on that section or not.
Is that going to be his main access off and onto
Yes.
that property?
Yes.
And I'm assuming him as a home builder, obviously carrying the 100,000-pound weights, the road will be signed properly so we don't have a issue 3 weeks later.
Yep.
Speaking from experience, so.
There we go.
Asking for it.
Move to approve.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Allen,
Second.
second by Mr. Rice. Further discussion? Anybody in the audience wish to address this? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carried. Action to approve agreement A2022-16, construction phase services with Ducks Unlimited. Mr. Schrader.
Mr. Mayor, Council, this is an agreement with DU to move forward with the construction of the wetlands just north of the Kelly property. They will be responsible to provide final bidding documents, construction staking, and construction management to ensure the project is being constructed per plans and specifications. Staff recommends approval to provide these services at a not-to-exceed amount of $50,000.
There was a mistake in what was in your packet. The wrong set of documents got printed out, and you were handed the correct ones at each of your places. Correct?
Yes, sir.
The only thing that changes is the amount. It was, I think the old one was 25,000.
So, yeah, the one that was in your packet was the design
And
phase.
this is actually,
So what's in front of you is for the construction. What's that?
this uses non-point source money.
Correct. This is all funded through our non-point source funds.
And does it have our new public works director's name instead of Kyle Crutch?
Yes.
Motion by Mr. McCardle,
Second.
second by Mr. Rice. Further discussion?
Do you
Anybody-
anticipate having the plan back so we can bid yet this year?
I do, and I would foresee probably putting a completion date of spring or early summer next year to allow someone to do the construction over the winter if they'd like.
Oh.
Okay. Further discussion? Anybody in the audience wish to address it?
Mayor Everson, council members, my name is Lauren Van Overscheld. I am the property owner right directly adjacent to the Kelly property, I guess is what, immediately west. And my only question, or main question is, I don't really know what the plan is over there. Has it been advertised, or are we still in the planning stages with that?
Well, they're finishing the design. They're actually not putting any dams in, they're digging it out.
Digging it out now. Initially, it was going to be a
I was thinking it would
dam.
be a low-head dam, and it ended
Yeah,
up not
where the
working.
old bridge was.
Right.
Correct.
So there will be nothing blocking the water. Flow will continue as exists.
Okay.
We will just dig it down so that water floods to the level that we need to grow the vegetation.
And will the vegetation of the dam, I mean, the wetland will be maintained on the Cali property then?
Yes.
Okay. I guess that covers my
Wasn't
concern.
it designed for 3 of them, Joe, on there, or 2?
I believe there's 4 separate sections that total 37 acres.
You haven't seen that yet?
No. I haven't.
Maybe you can give it to Joe.
Yep, I invite you. Well, we're going to be in touch the next couple of days. We have some other stuff to discuss, so, yeah.
We might show it to you tomorrow.
All right. Thank you.
Further discussion? Okay, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carried. Action to approve resolution R 2022-19, plat of Lot 1 of Moore's Addition in the southeast quarter of Section 9, Township 104 North, Range 60 West, 5th primary meridian, Davis County, South Dakota, is requested by Ashton Connell. Mr. Jennings.
Mayor and Council, Planning Commission recommended approval of this 6-0 with 1 absent. This is outside the ETJ, but it's within the 3 miles of city limit, so it has to come to city for approval. County approved this last Tuesday for the plat and variant. She is purchasing the land from her grandmother and fixing up the place out there.
The county did this last week?
Yep, county approved it last week.
Move to approve.
Motion by Mr. Rice. Second by Mr. McCarty. Further discussion? Anybody in the audience wish to address this? All those in favor of the motion, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carried. Second reading and hearing on ordinance O 2022-06, amending Woodland Heights Plan Development Unit. Ethan Co-op Lumber is requesting lots 10 through 12, Block 5 of Woodland Heights Land Development District be added to the 10-9B-3 sub-area C. These 3 lots were never designated into the sub-area. The owner wishes to allow permitted uses of single-family dwellings and multifamily dwellings, 12 units or less. Duplexes fit under the multifamily dwellings. Mr. Jennings.
Mayor and Council, Planning Commission recommended approval of this 4-0 with 3 absent. We have not received any further comments since first reading. The only person that we received a comment from was just they were in favor of it as long as it wasn't large apartment buildings. That's not the intention of Ethan Co-op. It's to put some duplexes there.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Rice, second by Mr. Barrington. Further discussion? Anybody in the audience wish to address this? All those in favor of the motion, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carried. Motion to adopt. Motion by Mrs. Charks.
Second.
Second by Mr. Allen. Further discussion? Anybody in the audience wish to address the adoption? Roll call.
Barrington.
Aye.
Allen.
Aye.
Charks. Smith.
Aye.
Sabers.
Aye.
Rice.
Aye.
Dosher. McCardle.
Motion carries. Second reading and ordinance O 2022-07, supplemental appropriations. Ms. Elway.
Mayor and council, I did not have any major changes to the ordinance from the first reading. The only items that changed is we had a department number listed wrong that was corrected, and we had some supplies that were listed as a capital. This computer equipment was listed in a capital account, which we switched to a 4-2 account. So no other major changes. I can answer any other questions. I can certainly walk through the whole explanation again if you would like. Up to you. Nobody's taking me up on that. So I'll answer any questions that you have.
A lot of blank stares. Okay.
I'll move to place on second reading.
Motion by Mr. Smith.
Second.
Second by Mrs. Charks. Further discussion? Does anybody in the audience wish to address this? Go ahead.
Stephanie, I just want to thank you. It's kind of an odd year. We didn't have this extent of not completed in 2021 projects. Last year saying not completed in 2020. And with the COVID and money flow information, while I'm not real pleased that we didn't complete a bunch of stuff in 2021, we're at least keeping track of where everything is. And the transparency part of it, I guess I'm pleased with. If anybody has any questions, here's where all the money is, and it's not being transferred from one department to another or anything else. So I just hope we can get through and finish the projects in 2022 that weren't finished in 2021, although we just got notified we have a couple that got pushed even beyond 2022. But it is, I think, a once-in-a-lifetime event with $2.5–3 million in other ARPA grant money or DANR grant money that we just need to stay on the ball and watch where our money's going. So I just wanted to say I went through it all again and highlighted all the parts and looked them all up, and it's like, yep, we're keeping track of it. So we didn't have to do that to this extent last year, and certainly not in any of the previous years. So I just want to thank you for that.
Another issue, we just had some issues with delivery of a lot of items that were projects that were budgeted in 21, and that's why they carried forward to 22 as well. So it's just been a crazy couple of years, I guess.
Doesn't understand.
The last 2 years has been 10 years.
Okay. Further discussion? Is there anybody in the audience who wishes to address this? All those in favor of the motion, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carried. Motion to adopt. Motion by Mr. Rice. Second by Mr. Barrington. Further discussion? Anybody wish to address the adoption? Roll call.
Charts. Smith.
Aye.
Savers. Rice.
Aye.
Dosher. McCardle. Barrington.
Aye.
Allen.
Motion carries. Action to approve designating funds in general fund reserves.
Mayor and council, I have 3 proposed designations. They are the same as what we reviewed at the last, or at the first reading for the supplemental ordinance. There would be $2.5 million designated in general fund reserves for future capital projects. It's really kind of the remainder of when we received the additional COVID money in and kind of seeing where the budgets hit the last 2 years. We have gotten at least a preliminary notification that we're still in consideration for the EDA grant. It was an outdoor tourism grant for ARPA, I think is the grant funds it came out of. That was a 50-50 match. So those funds that we had proposed or requested from council was for the construction of the jetty and the marina and the boat docks. So I'm asking for you to set aside that $1 million in the event that you get it funded, you would have a place to pull from. And then the last item is just $500,000 for assessment fund for development projects. We have a lot of projects, just like the one you just saw in Quincy Street, and we front the expense of those, and then we assess the cost back to the owners, and they pay it back over time. Michelle and Joe and I had been recently reviewing what the balance of that fund was, and we just wanted to make sure we have enough cash available for upcoming projects. Any of these 3 items, if you find later in the year that sales tax numbers aren't coming in as anticipated, or we have a major expense or something like that, you can always undesignate those funds and use it for budgetary purposes this year. It's also something that you can then go to for 2023 when you're passing your budget. That is how you funded the turf. It's also how you funded the indoor air exchange system. I can't remember what we called it. The purification system.
Plasma system.
Yeah, and then the ice condensers at the ice arena too. So that's the fund that you've been pulling from to do those major capital projects. And those are from savings realized as well as grant funds received over the last 2 years. And the action, I should have stated that too, the action to undesignate the funds is the same thing. It's just an action at a council meeting to undesignate the funds at any time.
I'll make a motion to approve the designation of funds.
Okay, motion by Mrs. Charles,
Second.
second by Mr. Allen. Further discussion? Anybody in the audience wish to address this? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carried. Hearing and first reading on ordinance 020-2205, codifying and amending bid 2. Mr. Johnson.
All right, well, I think easiest thing for me to do is going to be to start off with a little bit of procedure. This is the second phase in getting this ordinance adopted. You might remember about a month or so ago, we had the resolution of intent before council, which was adopted. Then we published notice, and that needs to all be done before we could bring it back to council tonight with the first reading on the ordinance and the hearing on the ordinance. So with that, I'll kind of walk you through the main points of what the ordinance seeks to do. First, and probably most important, is it will actually codify the provisions relating to this business improvement district. To this point, there's been a number of different ordinances and resolutions over the years that have related to this bid, but it's never been codified, so it's getting very cumbersome to have to track that procedural history every time that you've got to make a change or explain it to somebody or do any enforcement of the ordinances. So that's going to be a big help just to get it codified so it's easy to reference and it'll be easier to update as the years go on. So that's probably my favorite part of it. On top of that, there's a couple of other changes. One of them would be changing the total amount of the tax from $1.50 per room per night to $2. And then there are a couple of administrative and enforcement changes that we kind of picked up from other cities. So I think the biggest change out of all of those would probably be the increase from $1.50 to $2. I've had conversations with Don Peterson, who I think is here tonight. So he's representing a number of the motel owners who had some concerns about what the city was proposing to do here. And what he's asking for us to do is to basically continue the hearing portion of tonight, keep that part open until the next meeting so that the owners in the city have the opportunity to work through some of those concerns and potentially bring back some changes if any of those are going to be necessary. So just as a matter of procedure, I think you'll hear from Don here in a second, who will probably be asking you to do that. We're still okay to proceed with the first reading tonight since it'll be coming back for a second reading, but the main idea is just to keep that hearing open, not close that out tonight, and just allow those discussions to keep taking place over the next couple of weeks. Because ultimately we want to get something that's going to work for everybody. So,
Justin, quick question. If we have our first reading tonight, that doesn't mean in 2 weeks we can do the second reading in a month if we want to, can't we?
I'd suggest that you bring the second reading back again at the next meeting, and then if you need to table it at that time, or if there's going to be amendments to it at that point, you can always bring it back for another meeting after that.
So we postponed it then?
Yes, you could at that point, but I'd suggest, I'd at least suggest keeping it on the agenda for next meeting, and then you can take whatever action you need to at that time, whether that's postponing it or amending or whatever needs to be done.
We thought you were sleeping over there, Mr.
No, I was listening.
You educate him a little bit, and all of a sudden he's an expert. Dave, Mr. Alloyd, you want to come up and speak? Okay.
Good evening. Good evening. Don Peterson, local attorney. I'm here representing a group of the motel owners. It would be a majority. And basically, Justin summarized it right. Not all of the motel owners were aware of the proposed changes to bid number 2. And in the past, they had received a mailing, and this time it was published. So this caught some of them by surprise. And so Justin and I have discussed it, and we think that it's in everyone's best interest to continue this hearing so that the motel owners can get a clear idea of what the city is proposing, and if they have questions or concerns, and they can come back at a hearing, or we can try to work them out before a hearing, and then just proceed from there.
Any concerns you want to relate to us tonight, Don?
I don't think so. It's just, I think we need to understand what all is in the ordinance and then our proposed changes, and then and sit down with Justin and the mayor and Stephanie and talk about those, if there's anything to talk about, and then come back. I don't think a lot of the motel owners are aware of what the proposed changes are, and so that's probably the main thing, is just to get a good handle on what's being proposed to be changed.
Justin, I had one question for you. The transient number of days, is that set by state law?
Yes, that would be set by state statute.
Thank you. 28.
Yeah, they set it at 20. Mr. Dixon, did you want to speak?
Where is it done?
Okay, all right. Just wanted to give you a chance.
Okay, well, based on that, still, as first reading, I'll move approval of first reading so that we can get to have the time and discussion and take what action we need to at the next meeting, pending additional information.
Motion by Mr. Rice.
Steve, just to clarify, that would be, that would also include continuing the hearing till that date?
Yes, and continuing the hearing, thank you. Yeah, so the hearing stays open.
Okay, second by Mr. McCardle. Further discussion? Anybody else wish to address it? Okay, all those in favor of the motion, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried. Back to Mr. Johnson, finish up his little presentation.
Dan's going to pick.
Yeah. All right. So Dan already passed the test. We just finished. We left off with the discussion on the motion to table, and Dan just gave us a great reminder and segue back into the presentation here. So next point on there, I wanted to go over a couple of different other motions that we might see from time to time. First one is going to be the motion to amend a previous action. So you might see this in a meeting where we take final action on a given item. Somebody makes a main motion to approve or something along those lines. But for whatever reason, we might need to come back to that item and make a specific change to it. So you might see this motion to amend a previous action, and usually that's going to be for the purpose of taking some specific action in regards to the action that you already took on it. Very similar to that is the motion to reconsider. Really the difference with the motion to reconsider is you're basically revisiting the agenda item as if you never acted on it. So there's no previous baggage that you're, looking to change at that point. You're just going back, and you can make whatever new motion you might need to make on that item, as if there was no other prior action on it. Another one you might see is the motion to limit or extend debate. If you've got a particularly lengthy item that you're dealing with, a lot of testimony and eating up a lot of time, you may want to make a motion to limit the debate, set a specific time that a time limit for that agenda item, or use it to take the opposite action. If you set a timeline and you get to that point and you feel like it needs to be extended, you could also use the motion to extend the debate. So just another tool that the council has at their disposal. You've also got the motion to close debate and vote immediately, which a lot of times is referred to as calling the question. So that motion is one that does require a 2/3 vote, but if that does pass, then it ends all discussion and debate, and you vote on whatever it is that's pending. So You also have the motion to recess and sit as a different board, which we do quite frequently, but I'm not sure what other context we might have to use that one. But and then you've got the request to withdraw a motion, which once the motion's been made under the rules and it's been seconded, technically it belongs to the board at that point. So the general rule on that is if you've made a motion but you want to remove that, you can request that, and as long as there's not anybody that objects to removing or withdrawing that motion, whoever made the motion can withdraw it. So got a little bit here on handling the motions. Pretty much most of the motions that you'll deal with, they require a second. I alluded to once that second's been made, the motion belongs to the board. So once that motion and second are done, there can be some discussion on that motion. You might get some additional motions to amend or whatever it might be at that point. And eventually you get to the point where there needs to be a vote taken on that. And a lot of the motions that you'll see just require a simple majority, but there are occasionally those ones that require a 2/3, such as that motion to call a question, or in the case of approving variances, those will need a 2/3 support in order to pass. I mentioned earlier also that your motions also have a hierarchy, and we've got a sheet on the next page with kind of a brief overview of that. And then once the agenda item's been dealt with, the presiding officer will move on to the next agenda item until you're all through. So here's just a brief look at that motion hierarchy. You'll see that the main motion is kind of on the bottom, which comes to as a surprise to some people, but makes sense once you dig in there. You'll start getting your primary amendments after that, which is going to be a motion to directly modify the main motion. Might get a secondary amendment to modify an amendment. And then you've got your motions to table or postpone above that, motions to limit and extend debate, which would be decided or you vote on the main motion, same as calling the question or taking a recess or adjourning the meeting. So again, this is not a comprehensive list, but it's going to cover probably 99.9% of the situations we come across. So, and then just to wrap things up, it seems very complicated when you get to these rules, but really common sense kind of prevails. Just making those simple steps of keeping your motions in the positive can cut down a lot on it, out on a lot of the confusion, help you keep the record clear, make sure that people don't get too confused about what it is they're actually voting on or what they're actually discussing. So I guess one other note here is the rules aren't intended to intentionally complicate things, so you don't really want to use them as a sword and intentionally bog an item down with procedure. You want to try to let that item pass or fail on its merits. So with that, I'll open it up to any questions, which I'm assuming there aren't any.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
So I've seen point of order used once since I was on council. Can you explain within 30 seconds or less, or maybe more?
Probably not. Yeah, so point of order is really a way to try to get things back on track. So as I said, the presiding officer should be handing the floor off to certain speakers, and it might be a way to try to get things back on track, make sure people aren't talking over each other. It might be a way to get motions handled in the right way. So you might accidentally take a motion out of the hierarchy and decide one that's lower on the list before one that's higher on the list, and you need to call a point of order to get those decided back in the right order. So another thing that's You know,
Saw a lot of the-
pretty situational. I can go on, I've got a whole book.
Who's got the next question for him? Okay, thank you, Mr. Johnson. And that will go to Park and Rec and Planning and Zoning and maybe the Gulf Cemetery Board. The ones that really need to know it. Obviously, we have some things that aren't exactly being done right on a couple of the other boards, so it's always good to have a refresher on it. Okay. If no questions, I'll entertain a motion to enter into executive session in accordance with legal. I don't remember what South Dakota codified law it is.
125-2-3.
Motion by Mr. Charts, second by Mr. Rice. Further discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. All those nay. There won't be any action after executive